Open on London, 1889. A crowded parlor, tobacco smoke curling into gaslight. A woman with sharp eyes and a heavier presence than her frame suggests leans forward as if listening to someone you can't see. She speaks in a low, certain voice about ancient wisdom older than pyramids, about teachers who move like wind across Asia, and about a future in which East and West finally shake hands. Her name is Helena Blavatsky, the woman who will ignite a movement and scandalize an age. She did not begin in London. She began far away, in 1831, as Helena Hahn, born in Yekaterinoslav in the Russian Empire, present-day Dnipro, Ukraine. She grew up in a world of officers, tutors, and steppe horizons that seemed to whisper, "Go." At 17 she married a much older official, Nikifor Blavatsky, but soon fled that life, a broken match that left her with a surname and a lifelong habit of moving on. The stories say she chased knowledge from Cairo to the Caucasus, from Alexandria to the Himalayas, following rumors of hidden adepts like a sailor follows stars. Whatever the embroidery, the core is simple: she would not sit still. America, 1870s. Spiritualism is roaring through parlors and newspapers. Mediums promise letters from the dead and hands rise from dark cabinets. In October 1874, reporter-lawyer Henry Steele Olcott arrives at a remote Vermont farmhouse to investigate spectacular seances. There, among draped rooms and breathless crowds, he meets Blavatsky. Sparks fly, not romantically so much as mission level. Between them, something is set in motion. Within a year, in New York City, they co-found the Theosophical Society with attorney William Q. Judge and others, a transnational experiment dedicated to the study of ancient wisdom, comparative religion, and the latent powers of the human being. The motto they adopt, a line from Sanskrit, says, "There is no religion higher than truth." 2 years later Blavatsky publishes Isis Unveiled, 1877, a 2-volume broadside against dogmatic religion and narrow materialism, and a passionate survey of esoteric traditions that suggests a single, primordial source behind them all. The book's scholarship was debated, the ambition was undeniable. It made her notorious. It also made her a figure people could not ignore. Then, India. In 1879, Blavatsky and Olcott relocate to Bombay and launch The Theosophist, a monthly journal to carry their ideas across a colonized subcontinent aching for dignity and reform. By 1882, the Society's international headquarters settle under a vast banyan in Udyar, Madras, now Chennai, becoming a buzzing laboratory for dialogue between Hindu, Buddhist, and Western esoteric thought. Whatever one thinks of their metaphysics, the cultural effect is concrete. Theosophists engage Buddhist and Hindu reformers, champion vernacular respect, and platform Asian thinkers for Western audiences. At the movement's heart lies a dramatic claim. Blavatsky says she learns from enlightened teachers, Mahatmas, known as Maurya and Kuthumi, teachings about karma, evolution. Today, the British Library preserves a collection of those Mahatma letters, material artifacts of a correspondence that inflamed believers and skeptics alike and still divides readers on their origin. This is where her meteor blazes hottest, and where the crosswinds begin. In 1884, internal quarrels explode into the Coulomb affair in India. Expelled staff claim they helped stage phenomena. Letters surface. Trapdoors and sliding panels are alleged. The following year, the Society for Psychical Research in London issues the Hodgson Report, branding Blavatsky an imposter. It dents her health and reputation. Decades later, photographic expert Vernon Harrison re-examines the report and publicly criticizes its methods as biased and unreliable, a reminder that the scandals, case closed, turned out to be anything but. The divide remains. To admirers she was persecuted, to detractors, a charismatic fraud, to historians, a force whose sincerity and showmanship coexist uneasily in the record. Blavatsky retreats to Europe and does what wounded visionaries sometimes do. She writes her masterpiece. In The Secret Doctrine, 1888, she lays out a vast cosmogony, cycles within cycles, spiritual evolution braided with the material, humanity as a pilgrim through epochs. It's a collage of Vedas and Kabbalah, Neoplatonism and modern science. Arguing not that science is wrong, but that it's half the map, and that meaning resides in the other half. The same year she founds the esoteric section for committed students, and since 1887 she has been co-editing an audacious London journal titled Lucifer, reclaiming an old word for lightbringer, to provoke Victorian nerves and announce that she is not here to decorate the status quo. Her circle widens. Annie Besant, a firebrand reformer and future Indian nationalist leader, meets Blavatsky and soon becomes one of Theosophy's most formidable voices. Besant will go on to lead the Theosophical Society, found schools, and preside over the Indian National Congress. But in the late 1880s she is at Blavatsky's side, shaping a movement that thinks in continents rather than parishes. One evening in London in 1889, a young law student named Mohandas Gandhi visits the Blavatsky Lodge. The Theosophists, curious about his heritage, encourage him to read the Bhagavad Gita, in English at first, while he's still searching for a spiritual anchor in the West. The encounter does not make Gandhi a Theosophist, but it matters to his journey. Sometimes the spark is not a conversion but a conversation at the right time. Meanwhile, Theosophy's influence quietly seeps into culture. Composers, poets, and especially painters catch fire from its language of invisible structures and higher harmonies. If you've ever stood before a canvas by Vasily Kandinsky or Pete Mondrian and felt that color and line were trying to speak a spiritual geometry, you're hearing an echo. Both studied theosophical ideas while pioneering abstraction. Their notebooks and essays show them wrestling with the inner necessity of art, an argument that the invisible is real enough to move paint. Blavatsky herself is less ethereal than her myth. She chain-smokes hand-rolled cigarettes, argues like a barrister, and loves a good confrontation. She's also a brilliant editor and a relentless networker, corresponding across continents at a pace that would shame Twitter. Friends describe an atmosphere around her, equal parts irreverent wit, iron will, and wounded tenderness. Enemies describe manipulation and theater. Perhaps both descriptions circle the same gravitational field, the kind of personality that bends trajectories, of people, of institutions, of ideas. To understand why she mattered, follow three threads she knotted together. First, radical comparison. She insists that religions, when read deeply, rhyme. Theosophy invites a comparative method that was rare in Victorian public life. Set the Upanishads beside Plato, the Kabbalah beside modern physics, Buddhism beside Christian mysticism, and listen for a shared chord. You can argue her readings. You can't deny the daring. In an era of imperial hierarchies, that daring has ethical weight. Second, universal brotherhood. The society's first object, before clairvoyance, before metaphysics, is to form a nucleus of the brotherhood of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, caste, or color. This principle attracts reformers and challenges Victorian prejudices, even as Theosophy's own speculative language about root races leaves an uncomfortable tangle for later generations to critique and revise. The contradiction is part of the story, and part of the reason historians keep returning to it. Third, a bridge between worlds. Through lectures, journals, and alliances, Theosophy helps move Asian religious texts and voices into Western print culture, not as curiosities, but as reservoirs of wisdom. This is why you find Theosophists in dialogue with Buddhist reformers in Sri Lanka, Hindu scholars in India, and Sufi and Kabbalistic currents in Europe. It is also why the movement becomes a way station for later innovators. Rudolf Steiner, for example, will pass through Theosophy on his way to founding anthroposophy and its experiments in education, agriculture, and the arts. Bridges have traffic in both directions. But the bridges came at a cost. Blavatsky's claims of adept communication, provocative, magnetic, also made her the target of spectacular debunkings. The Coulomb and Hodgson controversies did not end with tidy verdicts. They left a legacy of ambiguity. Scholars now note both the flaws in the prosecution and the theatricality in the defense. This ambiguity is uncomfortable, yet fruitful. It forces us to read Blavatsky not as saint or swindler, but as a 19th-century modernist trying to synthesize science, spirituality, and myth under conditions that rewarded spectacle and punished sincerity. In the final years, Blavatsky holds court at 19 Avenue Road, St. John's Wood, London, where the Blavatsky Lodge meets and the European section hums. The parlor is crowded with radicals and seekers, skeptics and artists. She publishes The Key to Theosophy and The Voice of the Silence, both 1889, leaner books aimed at curious minds and aspiring practitioners. She is ill but tireless. On May 8, 1891, she dies in London. Around the world her students begin to mark that date, White Lotus Day, not as an occasion for mourning but for readings of the Bhagavad Gita, of Buddhist scripture, of her own writings, meant to remind them that traditions can meet without war. After her death, Annie Besant and others carry the torch, moving between spiritual work and political action. They build schools, launch journals, and keep the conversation between civilizations alive through the storms of the 20th century. Agree with Blavatsky or not, you are living in a world she helped sketch, a world where comparative religion is standard, meditation is mainstream, and art speaks unabashedly about spirit without apologizing to the Academy. What, finally, do we do with Helena Blavatsky? Perhaps we listen for her in a different register, not as oracle, not as charlatan, as a disruptor of categories. She refused the fence between science and mysticism, the wall between East and West, the old hierarchy that said truth was property, not pilgrimage. She told readers that ideas could migrate like birds, that a scripture in another language could be the mirror they didn't know they needed, and that the human being is stranger and greater than the 19th century allowed. If you're watching this in Lagos or London, Chennai or Chicago, odds are you've met some of her world. A yoga class beside a physics lab, a museum gallery full of abstract light, a bookshelf where the Upanishads lean against Jung. None of that is purely hers, but she pressed the accelerator. The last line, the motto she borrowed and made famous, is still blunt as a hammer. There is no religion higher than truth. Whether you meet that truth in a lab, a temple, or a sketchbook, she would insist the test is the same. Does it enlarge the soul, and does it widen the circle?